PATV presents Live from Prairie Lights, featuring the best authors and poets on the scene today. From up-and-coming to well-established writers from across the globe. You'll see them right here on PATV.
How's everybody doing today? I'm so glad it's not raining anymore. I was worried, so I posted on Facebook that all my friends had to come, rain or shine. Good evening, and welcome to the second annual reading of the Community Stories Writing Workshop at Shelter House in Iowa City. My name is Racina Liu, and I'm the workshop facilitator. Tonight, I join all the members of our writing group to thank you for coming and for helping us celebrate the stories and work of community writers. As we all know, Iowa City is a UNESCO City of Literature, and we, the Community Stories Writing Workshop, proudly partake in the literary identity of our town. Formed in fall 2010, we are one of several specialized groups at Shelter House serving community members. For the past year, our workshop has evolved to focus primarily on folk literacy, or the cultural ways of knowing, performances, and practices of the community, by the community, and for the community. Each week, we engage in social acts of storytelling and in collaborative meaning-making activities. These engagements entail talking, reflecting, and writing with each other. They entail responding and reading and responding to each other's stories. And most importantly, they entail encouraging and supporting one another as we experiment with various forms of expressions and revise drafts with peers and selves. In short, the Community Stories Writing Workshop continues to exist to celebrate our town's diverse voices and to provide local writers like ourselves with the time and space to tell, write, revise, and make meaning of stories that define each of us and our ways of living, our ways of knowing, our ways of folk. Tonight, the writers of the workshop and I thank everyone who have supported and afforded us contribution to the literary diversity of our town. Our group would not exist, and this collection of stories and artwork would not happen were it not for the sponsorships and collaborative efforts of the community. Specifically, we thank Jan Weismiller and Prairie Lights for hosting our annual public reading each spring, for generously donating 10% of the reading's daily sales to Shelter House, and for publishing our very first anthology chapbook, which, by the way, are available for sale tonight. We especially thank Jan for reaching out to us and providing us with the opportunity to publish, and for her consistent and long-term support of community writers and artists. We also thank the staff at Shelter House for their endless support of the Community Stories Writing Workshop since our inception in fall 2010. Without the support of Christy Canganelli, Coffee Dixon, Phoebe Trepp, Catherine Burford, Chris Bartels, all the wonderful case managers, and the staff with whom we work and see weekly, like Gina Jackson, James Quarles, Jim McHugh, we would not have the time and space each week to hold workshops. We would not have new members joining our group. We would not have access to printing and computers. And most importantly, we would not have the constant support, encouragement, collaboration, and the opportunity to work as a community of writers and artists. Finally, we thank the other service program facilitators at Shelter House for their collaboration and assistance in membership recruitment and publicity efforts. We especially thank the University of Iowa College of Education, including the faculty and students from the Counseling Psychology program, who runs various counseling services at Shelter House. And we thank a colleague and a good friend of mine, Meg Jacobs, from the Language Literacy and Culture program, who currently runs the Family Art and Story Hour, also at Shelter House. Since inception, our writing group has welcomed almost 50 writers and artists who have come through Shelter House. Tonight, we hear from 5 of them who share excerpts of their stories through narrative, photography, and wood carving. All the pieces have undergone multiple stages of revision, involving peer group responses and the writers making their own decisions and choices. Some of the stories have taken the writers as long as 2 years to compose and revise. And so, as you listen to each of them, we invite you to engage and experience with the stories. We invite you to reflect and connect. And finally, we invite you to respond and share as writers, as readers, and as members. I'm going to introduce our first reader tonight, Joel Muse. Joel is a musician, architect, and photographer. As a writer, he often tells stories that challenge prevailing assumptions about homelessness. As a reader, he validates the work of peers and says the authenticity of the stories stand for themselves. He said this last year as well. In addition to reading and writing, he enjoys capturing time and place on film. The anthology cover, right here, this beautiful thing here, comes from a large portfolio of images he took during his travels. Please welcome Joel.
Thank you, Rosina. Containing Martha Washington, Seattle. The first time I discovered that people lived in storage units when I was on a sunny Sunday in Seattle, when all the banks were closed and the Capitol Hill Block Party had effectively put a run on all ATM machines. All I had on me was a blank checkbook for a different account with not much money in it, so I used it to extend some momentary credit towards a 6-foot by 8-foot, steel-lined, concrete-floored unit, a self-storage unit in an enormous, climate-controlled facility where row after row of corrugated, steel-lined units were exactly identical, where orange garage doors rattled like a train wreck with the slightest touch, enough to shudder the devil. "What you have to look for," said the office manager, "is this piece of wood." She tapped the post with her walking stick. "That's when you know to turn to get to the elevator." I pushed my brand new 88-key Nord keyboard synthesizer down the aisle with all the computer gear I owned, plus a large black North Face backpack and a canvas Filson satchel, all on a loud, creaking cargo cart. Signs posted along the walls along the way stated clearly a 5-mile-per-hour speed limit strictly enforced, just in case those cargo carts could go any faster. If only my damn ATM card had worked and it wasn't Sunday and the banks weren't closed, I'd have a hotel room. Instead, there I was at a storage facility, reeling from vertigo with all the unexpected exchanges and terrible luck. Still, I was determined to do this on my own. No family, no help, just me and all that talent people kept talking about. "Remember, no sleeping," the manager said before returning to her office. She pointed to the stipulation on the lease contract. I nodded. As soon as she disappeared, I started unloading my stuff off the cart. Just then, an alarming cacophony of garage doors opening awoke my confused state of mind. With the disappearance of the manager, the rows and aisles seemed to spring to life with inhabitants. People emerged from several units, opening up as if they were awakening to the dawn of the lime-green rays of fluorescent light. I could not help but gawk at the strategically placed couches and chairs placed just inside the gape of the doors, which were conveniently placed for comfortable seating. I resisted the obvious question. "So, do you live here?" I interpreted this place as a sort of second home for hobbyists and otherwise backyard garage industries. I was intrigued, comforted, and overwhelmed by this place as an adaptive environment. In its alternative sense, the strictly moderated spaces aptly stocked with the needs of a person cut off from normal society also reminded me of the chambers inside Egyptian tombs. To return the cart, I strode down the aisle, searching for that lone vertical piece of timber amongst the sea of sterile, white corrugated steel reverberating the humming of the light ballasts. I could see down each aisle that people were rearranging their things. All of them seemed to have strategically placed what looked like incredibly comfortable couches inside their units. If it weren't for the incredibly monotonous view and reverberating crashes and mechanical buzzing, it might have been a pleasant homecoming moment there. We were like any other tenants, only we lived in storage units. But alas, all I could think of was what the manager had repeatedly said to me: remember, no sleeping. As I approached the elevator, I saw the glow of neon and a fluffy texture of an incredibly silly hat. The brim protruded forward, and under it peered out the youthful eyes of an aging woman who walked with a cane and reached toward me. Her skin was like cellophane wrapping the bones of her hand. "Hello, young man," she said as I warmed her hand with mine. "You know, when I was young, most people's rent was only 25% of their income. Now the government suggests 45%, but most people's rents are even higher. Nowadays, this is all I can afford. But it doesn't stop me from coming out and having fun like I did in the old days." "Nor should it stop you," I said with a grin. Her name was Martha Washington, and in her younger years, before the rattling of orange metal doors and concrete floors of self-storage, she lived in a mansion on Capitol Hill. Martha said she was one of the help, though she assured me she was treated just as well as one of the family. I remember the sincerity in her voice as she recalled her life, how convinced she was of a time long past when she was loved. I had had a rough year, severing ties with my family, searching for a new home, and while I sat there with Martha in the storage facility that afternoon, I found myself feeling oddly comforted and normal. Like a gender-bending octogenarian Elvis, or Jesus in a purple jumpsuit. The old woman, or maybe it was her touch, helped me understand the strength of my own grip, the sound of my own laughter, the possibilities of me belonging somewhere, somehow. When we talked, I didn't think about how she got to the bathroom, if she broke the rules by sleeping, if she felt safe with her door unlocked, which unit was hers, what she did from 9 p.m. till 6 a.m. when the facility doors were shut. We never got to discuss such things. They didn't matter. Chicago. Months after meeting Martha, when I was on my own and homeless once more, I was determined to spend my Thanksgiving in Chicago without having to shudder to my mother as she slandered my father, and without having to pay for shelter. My plan was to enjoy the contemporary plays and jazz and booze of the city with what little money I had, and sleep on the elevated train. But after 2 dizzying days of finding free food and smoking cigarette butts in my pipe, I found myself desperate for shelter, even enough to consider the Pacific Garden Mission, a place I once noticed as a child because of the bright neon cross hanging above the building doorway. By the 3rd evening, I had developed an intuition about the weather, and that evening's peach dusk promised that it would become another cold night. Besides, I was sick of the vertigo I had developed attempting to sleep on the elevated train for the 2 previous nights. Dozing off while traveling forward and waking up while traveling backward was nauseating. I also learned that begging for food on the train was a social disconformity so severe that not even I would attempt to make a habit out of it. In one incident, 2 girls had shared a sandwich and both refused the last bite, so I asked if I could have it. One of them started singing, "You had me at hello." It was an experience so delightful I vowed never again to repeat it. I decided I would subject myself to the unknowns of the Pacific Garden Mission instead. Trekking my way through the city, I took my last ride on the elevated train. I hurtled down the steel-stilted structure and strode south across the cracked streets, fleeting from curb to curb in avoidance of traffic to Canal Street, and approached the famous neon Jesus Saves cross I had glimpsed at so many years ago. Someone directed me to the entrance in the rear. I walked along the institutional brick wall and approached the monumental front desk, which looked like a judge's platform. "How do I check in?" I asked the man behind the desk, a desk that was imposingly elevated and gated like a police precinct. "That ended at 8, and it's nearly 9, he said gruffly, and then asked, "Do you believe in the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ?" "I believe there is probably a guy named Jesus," I replied. "Well, I guess that's honest," he said. "Have you eaten? Are you hungry?" "Starving." On this night, my first night at the Pacific Garden Mission, I was fortunate enough to be allowed to break the rules and have a commercially wrapped sandwich and a bag of chips. It wasn't much, but it was enough to quell the barking dogs of hunger. I limped to the day room on my throbbing feet, where I estimated up to 400 men sat in folding chairs listening to the whooping and hollering of a man bestowed with Jesus something. He spoke as if licensed to do so, as if we had to listen because he had knowledge about God he needed to bestow on us, as if he could judge us if we didn't. Whatever we did beyond the walls of the mission, after all, was something we ought to be ashamed of, wasn't it? Iowa City. About 2 years from that day, I will do it again. Alone, homeless, and living in a storage unit, only this time, like Martha, I will do it with more confidence. I'll have a leather chair, a squishy mat to insulate me from the cold concrete, and some denim rugs. I'll get the furnishings from the nearby farm store. I will think to myself how it's all quite fashionable and even call it urban agritecture. A battery-operated lantern and an inflatable mattress will give me light and a flat support to rest. There'll be a bathroom in the filling station next door and a creek on the other side, but the cold will creep in through the uninsulated steel roof, so I will have to move on with winter approaching. But for a while, listening to the soothing coos and quacks of Canadian geese by the creek will give me a charming alternative to watching a movie or listening to headphones. I will sleep quite comfortably, but wake up freezing cold and scared that if I can't find my shoes, wallet, and coat fast enough, I'll pee my pants trying to get to the bathroom on my way to buying the obligatory cup of coffee that goes with urinating in gas stations.
Thank you, Joel. Our next reader is Patty Sylvia. Patty is an active community member and devotes her time to the food bank and the clothing bank and the local churches. She is a writer of inspiration, a loving grandmother of 3, and a person of faith. To date, she has been clean and free of mind-altering substances for almost 2 years and credits it in part to her faith, to her community, and to her writing. The narrative that she shares tonight is a beautiful reflection of this journey. Please welcome Patty.
Thank you. To belong. I used to sit at my coffee table and run my hands across the surface. I'm keeping my hands busy so I don't smoke away my drugs so fast, is what I would say. But really, I was trying to feel for drop drugs. You know, cocaine rocks. Back then, I had no thought of anything but drugs. How do I get more? Who can I call? Who's going to want to get high with me tonight? Sometimes I would save just enough and invite a friend over to join me. I would entice him by telling him I had some to share. Then when he came over, I would offer a few hits. By then, he'd be hooked, and he'd want more. So he would have to spend a few $100s himself to get enough for the both of us. I was conniving, always using business bargaining skills to keep my fix going. There were times I'd invite a large group of people over, sometimes 8 or more at once. Everyone would chip in money for the drugs, and I would get them. The thing was, when I returned, I'd always have some extra set aside for myself, 1 or 2 $50 bags. And when everybody ran out of their supplies, I would say nothing and let them leave so that I could smoke mine by myself. The truth was, I was no friend to anyone, nor was anyone truly a friend to me. We were all just fellow drug users. I did not belong in the community. I would walk in the streets and hide my face from everyone, especially the police, my head down and staring at the sidewalk, as if that would disguise me. I wasn't exactly hard to pick out. I had long red hair. I was nothing but skin and bones. I didn't care how I dressed. Sometimes I would even wear the same thing for a couple of days. I was untidy, baggy eyes on a skeletal frame that sometimes went limp. I also didn't pay much attention to smells, unless, of course, there was something fake put on the pipe. You know, like candle wax or fingernails. In fact, once this guy, a dealer, had broken fingernails mixed in a bag with cocaine rocks. He tried to pass it off as drugs, and I didn't know it until it was too late. The thing was, that kind of mix you couldn't actually smoke. You could smell it, but you couldn't smoke it. My taste buds weren't any better. Coke had a bit of a bitter taste because of the baking soda used to rock it up. And so I used to always taste baking soda in my mouth. It would leave a dry aftertaste, or yuck mouth as I would call it, like you didn't brush your teeth. With Coke, if you're not careful, the burning of the pipe could turn your teeth and your lips black from the copper used for the screen to make the filter. It could numb your tongue like it did mine. I hated that feeling, and many times I wanted it to stop. I wanted to feel again, but I just didn't know how. And then something happened that changed my life forever. I got arrested. A neighbor came over and asked me to get him some drugs. He knew that if I could get it for him, and since he wanted enough that I knew I would make out with at least a $50 piece for myself, I agreed. I made the phone call to the dealer and set things up. The two of them, my neighbor and the dealer, showed up at my apartment at the same time. They did the deal between themselves. After a short while, they both left my place, and I returned to playing Moncala and cribbage with another friend of mine that was in my apartment. I sat down and put my drugs on a plate. As I proceeded to play the games and smoke a little more, I heard a knock at my door. When I answered, there were two guys, whom I've never seen before, stood at the door. They asked me if I could get them some drugs. I don't know what you're talking about, I told them, and motioned to close the door. Then they followed up with more questions. They asked me if I knew certain people. When they got to about the fourth name, I confirmed that I knew him because he was my neighbor. As soon as I admitted to knowing my neighbor, the two guys took badges out of their pockets and introduced themselves as police officers. They said they needed to come in and search my apartment. Not without a search warrant, I said, but to little effect. They pushed their way in and got rough with me, placing handcuffs on my wrist. I spent the next few days in jail, and during that time, all I wanted to do was numb myself again. All I wanted to do was return to drugs. Needless to say, as soon as I got released from jail, the first thing I did was to get high again, even though I knew I could get in trouble for doing it. And guess what? I did. While I was getting high at home, my probation officer and two others from the drug task force showed up at my door and caught me using once again. And again, off to jail I went. I returned this time for 3.5 months. Scared and worried, I wondered what would happen to me. I had 10 years in prison hanging over my head. To be behind bars with no fresh air at all was one of the hardest experiences of my life. It stunk in there because there were so many inmates sharing the same area. Some of them rarely showered because of lack of privacy. Everybody wanted things their own way, but they couldn't do that because it's up to the guards when you're in jail. You had to do what the guards say. You watched whatever TV shows the guards decided for you. You ate the food that they decided. Food you wouldn't want to feed to a pig if you had one. Jail was an ugly place. I lost everything I owned while I was in jail. I was evicted and had all my stuff thrown out on the street. Jail scared me, but it was only part of my hard journey to getting clean. What kept me on the path to recovery after 3.5 months behind bars was drug court and rehab. When I got out of jail, I went right into Mecca drug rehab and into drug court. Mecca was rough because, again, in some ways, it was like jail. The staff dictated when I got up in the morning, what I ate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. In the morning, it was usually cold cereal, oatmeal, toast, or bagels. The afternoon was always cold meat sandwiches. And supper was catered by a company that didn't use any spices, so the food was very bland. During the day, I went to classes nonstop, from early morning to late evening. Life was very structured in Mecca, but it wasn't my own. I was there for 3.5 months. Then there was drug court. Drug court tells you everything you can do and who you can be around. It controls every aspect of your life, as if you were a young child just learning how to live. The thing is, when you're an adult, this isn't the best feeling. You just don't want to be treated this way. At first, I remember I cried a lot, and I went through a lot of counseling to learn how to deal with all these different feelings and emotions. Over time, though, I came to realize that because of all this structure that was forced on me, I also learned to appreciate it. I never knew that I could handle life's problems without the use of drugs. Before, I always thought I had to be high in order to survive. I thought I would be in too much pain if I were straight. But through counseling and through my faith in God, I came to see the importance of opening up. At least it would allow me to get my problems out in the open instead of bottling them up all the time. Before, I never had the strength within myself to stay clean and sober. I also didn't know just how much writing could be therapeutic for me. Excuse me. Writing releases a lot of emotions within me. It also allows people to know who I am, and more importantly, how I am coping with everyday challenges. These days, I just don't feel the need to numb myself anymore. These days, I am accepted in the community. I belong. My clothes are bright colored. My hair is always brushed and styled. My nails are shapely, filed, and polished, and I wear makeup. I am accepted in the community now. I belong. I smell only liquid soaps. You know, the flowery kind? Lavender, if you must know. There's always food in my home. I smell it. Things like Fanta orange soda, Hershey's chocolate, juicy steak, rare, if you must know. I always make my own seasoning mix. It has oregano, thyme, garlic, Sazon, and I mix them all together in a bag. I quite enjoy cooking. I am accepted in the community now. I belong. I hear children playing, and I think of my grandchildren, the joy they bring me. I hear music. I hear praises. I'm proud of you, people would say. You've come a long way. What a difference you've made in your life in the past year. Now when I walk, I hear my own voice greeting others as well. Yes, I am accepted in the community now. I do belong. I work at the food bank and the clothing banks for my church. I am very much wanted and needed in both of these places. I am also trusted enough that I now have a key to the churches. I have permission to use it at any time. This kind of trust has helped me a great deal. I like feeling like I'm important. I know that if it weren't for all my hard work, I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't be accepted in the community, and I wouldn't belong.
Thank you, Patty. Our next reader is Bruce Clark. Bruce is a U.S. Army veteran and one of the newest members of the Community Stories Writing Workshop. He is a skilled wood carver and describes himself as a craftsman who can do a couple of things and do them well. He specializes in creating wood spirits, morel mushrooms, castles, towers, and lighthouses. If you see here, these are his work. He carves them each individually, and he's going to be talking about this vase here in his essay. Through his craft, he tells stories of community, culture, and friendships. For Bruce, carving is very much about learning as it is about catharsis. His is a short, reflexive piece on how his craft came to be. Please welcome Bruce.
Thanks, Christina, for that nice introduction. It was perfect. It's just the way I wrote it. Kidding aside, I'm not much of a writer. I'm more of a storyteller. But I'm going to try to stick to this as much as possible so I don't get drawn and quartered afterwards. A lot of people see this face and they think it's, a lot of people think it's a Santa Claus, and it does kind of resemble a traditional German Santa, but I've heard everything from Santa Claus to the Zigzag Man. It's actually a German wood spirit, and it's carved in the faces in the trees in the Black Forest in Germany. And it protects the forest from fire and destruction and brings peace, happiness, and good luck. If you have one in your home, it's supposed to do the same thing for you. I carve them as small as this on a deer antler. I do little mushroom antler keychains. But most of my sales are my sticks, and I do canes and walking sticks. Most of my sales come from bars. I go in a lot of bars, and I'm from Cedar Rapids, and a lot of every bar in Cedar Rapids knows who I am. Not so much the drinking part, but because of my sticks. I'll go in and I'll have a soda, and I'll lean a stick against a bar, and I don't hit on people to buy my stuff. It sells itself pretty well because you just don't find it everywhere. So I'll lean one on a bar, and sooner or later somebody will ask about it, and I'll speak loud enough for everyone to hear so I don't have to repeat myself, and tell them what they're about and what I charge for them and that. And a lot of people say I don't charge enough for my sticks, but then there's always a few that think that it's too much, and they've got a Dremel tool, which is what I use. I carve with power. I don't use knives. They've got a Dremel tool at home, and they're going to go home and do one themselves. And more power to you. Let me come with you. Maybe you can teach me something I don't already know. So it kind of reminds me of a story of Picasso was sitting in a bar one time, and the guy recognized him, and asked him to draw something on a piece of paper for him, bar napkin or whatever. And Picasso whipped this thing out and drew this thing for the guy and handed it to him. And the guy says, "Wow, thanks a lot, man." He says, "That's really nice." And Picasso says, "Wait a minute." He says, "I want 10 grand for that." And the guy says, "What? It only took you a few minutes to draw that." And he said, "No, it didn't. It took me 40 years. And carving's kind of like that. I've been carving seriously now for about 8 years. I've had several jobs throughout my life, and carving seems to be the best job I've ever had. I'm the best boss I've ever had. I've had some good bosses, but I'm still better than they are. So this face, it used to take me all day to carve it, well, along with my mushrooms. A mushroom stick and a face would take hours. Now I can carve that mushroom in about 20 minutes, and this face I can carve in about 30 to 40 minutes. And it just comes with repetition and teaching yourself something new just about every time out. That comes a little fewer and farther. Those moments are a little fewer and farther between now, but every now and then you'll still, after all this time even, man, I can't believe I wasn't doing it like this before. But so it's always a learning experience with the carving. And I guess with that, I'm going to try to narrow this thing down so I don't go over my time limit here. If you have any questions afterwards, I'd be glad to talk to you, and thank everybody for coming out. This is really a great turnout. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate the time you spent to take out of your evening to come up tonight and listen to what everyone has to read. So thank you.
He was totally off script, but that's cool. Our fourth reader is Anthony Ballesteri. He has a 13 13-year-old daughter who inspires him to reflect, write, and share stories with others. He enjoys writing about everyday occurrences, his independent life in the community, and his memories of loved ones. He is the first member of the Community Stories Writing Workshop, and in fact, until Shelter House relocated to its current facility, he was our only member. Originally from Monterey, California, Anthony lives independently in Iowa City and proudly holds a permanent position at the Goodwill store. Please welcome Anthony.
Papers here kind of beat up, but anyway, this is titled 7 Minutes. I was running late for work the other morning, so I decided to catch the UI CAM bus for the very first time, thinking that it would be faster to make the transfer into the city bus downtown. I boarded the bus and sat in the front side seats with my back against the window. As the bus started to move, I suddenly noticed the weight of all eyes on me. I was wearing my sunglasses so I could see the passengers and their stares without them knowing that I was also looking at them, at their long gazes, up and down, back and forth. Funny, just something as simple as tinted lens can distance us so far apart. Anyway, I began to fidget in my seat, my heart racing to where I could see the left side of my shirt moving up and down, thumping. Why me? I thought. I mean, sure, I was old enough to be all these college kids' father, and sure, I didn't look like I was heading to class at this late age in life, but their stares felt heavier than years that divided us. So what was it that caught their attention? I touched my nose just to be sure I didn't have any dried up snot hanging at the end of it, but no, nothing. I was clean. Of course I was clean. I'm always clean. Didn't have my hair do, as I never have a strand on my head out of place. I was also dressed to the nines and even sporting a brand new almost pair of new sneakers, so it couldn't have been my dress code either. Between fidgeting and shifting my weight from left to right, I started to entertain the possibilities. Maybe these college kids thought I was questionable because of the way I carried myself. Maybe they thought I looked like a mad bomber, serial killer, or just a dude that is straight out of bounds, period. Whatever the case, my body quickly heated up as the ride went on. The fabric under both arms clung to my armpits like gold Post-it notes. My palms sweated, my fingers twitched, my legs trembled. I was tripping. At that point, I guess I could have just pulled the stop cord, gotten off the bus, and walked the rest of the way. But then I thought, nah, that ain't my style. I ain't never gonna show no weakness like that. Not at least not to a bunch of college kids. Born and raised in Monterey, California, I grew up in the neighborhood, and this is how I wore my hair, how I dressed, and how I carried myself. I've looked this way since 1971, and at age 55 years of age, it's still how I chose to look. Getting off the bus would imply giving in, or maybe I should say giving up on myself and all the things that I have worked hard for. It would imply I was a chump, and sorry, I just don't roll like that. For almost 2 years now, I've been living independently on my own. I've been going to a good and steady job at Goodwill. Why, just a few months ago, they offered me a permanent position. This, after 15 months of working there, after showing that I'm a dedicated hard worker. Every day of my life, I work hard to contribute somehow, to function like everybody else. So no, I ain't no chump. I see clients at work who have disabilities, who use wheelchairs, walkers to get around, who sometimes slur their speech because they cannot control their jaw muscles. I see them all, some of them with more severe disabilities than others, and they all come into work every day. They come in, they smile, and they contribute. You know why? Because they ain't no chump either. In fact, working at Goodwill has been a blessing for me. It has helped me understand myself. It's helped me to see my good fortune and all that carries with it. How many people, after all, could say they have a beautiful and intelligent 13-year-old daughter who talks and writes regularly? So no, I ain't no chump, and I ain't gonna start by getting off no CAM bus. Determined to ride the CAM bus to where I had to go, I forced myself to continue to sit there silently that morning, at this time less fidgety even. When the bus finally reached downtown, I got off like the rest of the passengers. I walked to the bench and sat down and watched the rest of the college kids file off, one right after another. As I looked on, I finally realized why I got all those stares. Why? Because I was the only one on board who didn't have a BlackBerry phone in one hand and an iPod in the other.
Our next story is written by Randall Ziske, a U.S. Army veteran, a peer teacher of writing, and a writer of grace. In workshop, Randall generously shares his drafts and mentors peers through their writing processes. Tap into your 5 senses, he often says. Of writing and telling stories, he says, I do it so others know my stories, so they don't have to feel alone. Randall recently moved to Missouri and cannot be here with us tonight. He had asked me to read on his behalf. This piece took Randall 2 years to complete, and so I hope I do it justice. Montana. Sorry, this is kind of weird. Okay. Sorry. Montana. Montana, 1976. In summer 1976, I was 22 and coming home from the United States Army. Mom picked me up from the airport and cried the whole ride home. It seemed she was always crying those days. She cried the day I went into the service, and she cried the day I returned. I told her, make up your mind. Are you sad that I left, or are you happy that I returned? Stay with us for a year, son, was all she said back. I was all grown up then, but I couldn't bring myself to disappointing her. I finally just gave in and stayed with my folks for 1 year to the day. It wasn't that I didn't want to live with her. Sometimes there are things that happen in your life that you just want to let go, even if it means that you also have to let go of the people you love most. Montana, 1959. I grew up 26 miles south of Canada and 8 miles west of North Dakota. Sydney, Montana sat on flatlands, and it snowed 8 months of the year, with only a small window of time for spring, summer, and fall. The population consisted of 175 people. More than half were relatives, mothers, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents. This was the late 1950s and early 1960s. Women wore shirts that had to be buttoned up to the neck, but most of the time, they wore dresses. Young girls could wear pants, but only under their dresses to school, and even then, the dresses couldn't go above the knees. It was a different time back then, closed and reserved, a time for things hidden, a time that demanded them. People always seemed to whisper, but they never spoke, and I learned pretty fast that speaking in a regular voice just wasn't allowed. I learned pretty fast, too, about shame, how you can never tattle on an adult, no matter what. Worse than getting fist punched in the face or being touched in the wrong way by your own father was getting labeled bad names, names that came with the ugly words that defined you and marked you. So most times I stayed quiet, wore my happy face mask, and blocked out ugly memories, even if they were just from a day ago. You see, I was the only male in our immediate family. There was Grandma, my mom, my sister, and me. As early as age 5, I took on the role of the man of the house, which meant that there was no time for being a kid. I worked the farm and had 4 o'clock morning chores like getting eggs from the chicken coop and milking cows to make butter and heavy cream. And then there was also the garden. I planted it, cleaned it, picked it. I'd also use buck bales of hay from our neighbor to feed the animals. While I did the chores inside the house, the women would prepare meals. Every morning after breakfast, I would ride the range with other men and herd the livestock. We would gather the cattle to the stockyards and separate them by brand. To do this work, I had to learn to ride a horse early on. In fact, back in those days, knowing how to ride a horse was an important part of being a man. In all, I would make $5 a week, and adding to the few that Grandma and Mom made working at one of the only restaurants in Sydney. Boy, were we poor. Of course, I never realized it. As a kid, all I knew was my sister and I had clothes, food, and roof over our heads. Our home was small. It was a small two-bedroom cabin. We had electricity, but no running water, so we had to run pipes into the ground. There was also an outhouse just about 10 feet from the door. At night, we'd take a light with us to check the outhouse for critters, such as the snakes and other wild animals, because they would crawl in just to keep warm. Baths happened inside a round wash basin in the middle of the kitchen. Both entrances to the kitchen were covered with curtains for privacy because we had no door on either side. Yes, we were poor. Granted, Mom always tried to make things better, even though her good intentions often backfired. Once for Halloween, because we didn't have money for masks, Mom dressed me up as a hobo, thinking it was better to have a costume than not. She dressed me up in a ripped shirt and pants and smeared my face with black grease. I looked horrible, just like a hobo. Mom seemed proud she was able to do something for me. I didn't say anything. I just smiled, and then after she left for work, I stayed home and cried. Never did go to school that day. Of course, Mom was the only one with good intentions. One Christmas, my sister and I couldn't have been much more than 7 or 8 years old. We were told that JCPenney's was going to send a person to our house and donate $5 to every kid for gift buying. We qualified for the program because Mom was on welfare, although at the time we didn't know it. We just thought it was a regular Christmas thing. Anyway, my sister and I sat at home that one evening at 6 o'clock just waiting for the JCPenney's guy to come and take us Christmas shopping. We waited and waited. 7 o'clock came, no JCPenney's. 8 o'clock came, no JCPenney's. Then 9 o'clock came, and at last it was bedtime. So what did we do? We curled up, cried. We thought we must have been so bad that the JCPenney guys didn't even want to come get us. Anyway, the next day, not wanting Mom not to have anything for Christmas, I went to the neighborhood bargain basement, which really was just some woman selling crafts out of her house. I went in there, looked around, and ran across a beautiful blue crystal necklace. Well, it was actually quite ugly as hell. But as a kid, it was the most beautiful thing I thought I'd ever seen. And I wanted it for Mom. I kept going back and forth, knowing all the while that I didn't have money for it. Eventually, I just took it and put it in my pocket. I was so proud to. I ran home, wrapped it up, and put it under the Christmas tree. Then Christmas came, and Mom acted all surprised and said it was beautiful. Afterwards, she asked how I was able to afford it, and I lied. I told her it was from lunch money I'd saved up. Mom knew, though, that we didn't get lunch money that often, but she just nodded anyway. I only saw her wear that blue thing once, on Christmas Day, and never again. Mom and I have always had that unspoken understanding between us, and I'm not sure when all of that stopped, but eventually it did. As I got older, we saw fewer and fewer of each other. Mom started dating again, and sometimes I would not see her for months. I became heavily involved in sports, swimming, wrestling, running, and I would place first in them all. In fact, at 13, I nearly made it to the U.S. Olympic swimming team, if you can believe that. Placed 5th. Had I placed 4th, I would have had the chance to represent this country. From 7th grade through high school, I was also undefeated in wrestling until I quit sports altogether. The truth was, victories were sweet, but never quite enough when neither parents were there to witness it, when the cheers you heard in the crowd sounded more like a ball of mixed-up noise than that of your mom's or even your dad's. "You did it, son," or "We're so proud of you." Mom's excuse was that she didn't want to see me get hurt doing sports, but really there wasn't much I couldn't do. Seems by then, our unspoken understanding had died out, or maybe it never existed at all. Maybe I made it up in my mind. After all, Mom had us young, my sister and me. There was only so much a young woman like her could handle, raising 2 kids and enduring black eyes and bloody noses from our dad, Whitey, whenever he came by. I remember once Mom wanted to put us up for adoption and then for us to go to live with rich people. She tried to convince us that these people could provide for us and give us things that she couldn't. My sister was willing and ready to go, but I didn't want to leave. I figured, what's better than the home you're living in? Why would I want to go live with a fake mom? Besides, I knew Mom had some kidney disease and she thought she was going to die at 22 from it. If her death was going to hurt, then I wanted to be there for her. Even at 5, I knew I couldn't walk away. Montana, 1977. 2 weeks after I moved out and went on my own, the news finally came to pass. It was 8:30 at night, and when my sister and stepdad knocked on my apartment door. This visit so late in the evening couldn't be good, I thought. From the anticipation, my heart fell and my guts tightened. Mom just died, my sister said. I remember feeling a few tears, but I was numbed otherwise. The day came when we had to bury Mom, and as usual, I was late. When she was still alive, Mom even used to tell me, "Randy, you will be late to my funeral." And, well, she was right. By the time I arrived, everyone was already there waiting for me. I remember standing over her coffin and noticing the lifeless body dressed in a beautiful blue outfit, the hair done only like Mom could do. I stared at her, hoping, praying, that she would open her eyes or say something, anything to me. But neither happened, and my heart, full of grief, could handle no more. Everyone filed out of church, but I stayed till they closed the casket and moved it to Mom's final resting spot. I watched as the people lowered the beautiful skinny brown box into the large dark hole, one that would eventually be sealed with dirt. I bent down to the ground, scooped a handful of earth, and threw it onto the casket. Afterward, I turned away, never to return. This concludes our reading from the Spring 2012 anthology. Again, thank you for celebrating with us the work of the community writers. The 5 we've heard tonight represent only a small fraction of the many, many creative individuals who have come through Shelter House. Virginia Woolf once said, "Every writer needs a room of her own to create, reflect, and write," and while she was referring to women writers, this could not be truer for many community writers in Iowa City or in any town for that matter. Access to such space is not always available, particularly for individuals and families experiencing homelessness and other barriers. Shelter House at Iowa City has been a pivotal sponsor and supporter of, among many other services, the Community Stories Writing Workshop, providing those in transients, including many of the community writers we've heard tonight, with the resources and assistance necessary to identify strengths and build toward independence and self-empowerment. Thank you again to Jan Weismiller and Prairie Lights for hosting tonight's reading, for donating 10% of the day's sales to Shelter House, and for publishing these beautiful chapbooks, which again, I hope you will pick up for sale. It's for sale tonight. The book offers full-length versions of the stories we've just heard, so please buy yourself a copy or two and support our community. Finally, I would like to thank all the writers for their hard work through the revision process and for sharing their stories with us tonight. Please join me in a final round of applause for our writers. Does anybody have questions?
Check in the mail. I just paid for the rest of the year.